the greatest blunder ever made by any world power. I looked up on the internet to see some of the big blunders that have been made. I didn't have much time to do it, but I saw a list of financial blunders that were made. And there was a couple of divorces on there that cost a couple of $1 billion because somebody, fooled around with somebody else and ended up with a divorce. Also, I saw one on there with an airplane that was crafted, and on the first flight that it was to make, it crashed on takeoff because somebody had made some blunders that, made it crash. So there's been some pretty big ones, but this one that I'm going to share with you is the greatest blunder that's ever been made, and it's made by a world power. It's in Revelation 14, verse 9. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand," and it goes on in actually chapter 13, which comes before that text. It says, and he had power. This is talking about the beast and the image of the beast. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. Now, there's a significance to the two places, I believe. When a person receives the mark in their forehead, it means that they believe the beast is right. What the beast is doing, they believe it's right. What the image of the beast, which is following the beast, what they're doing is right, and so they follow it because they believe it's right. But then also there's people that say, no, we know that's not right, but this is so powerful. When the beast and the image of the beast get together, there's so much power here, we don't dare resist this power. We're going to go along with it. And so they get the mark in their hand. Going on, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Now, there's no generation that knows more about how this could happen than us. I mean, you can just see the control building to where it gets to where if you're not on the right list, you can't buy and you can't sell anything. And so, we can see that things are definitely moving toward the direction of fulfilling this prophecy. Yes?
Every time I check out at the grocery store using my card, I think to myself, the mark of the beast hasn't come yet. Sometimes I even say it to the clerk. It hasn't happened yet.
Yes. But, if we move to a cashless society, that card will be a part of the plan. And so, we see evidence of things being put in place. Now, I'm not one to say that it's all with a diabolical plan, to end up fulfilling this prophecy. I think people are making steps. They think this is a blessing, an advantage. They don't know how it'll get used in the future. Then it says, here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now this chapter has a number of clues, actually, as to who the beast is and who the image of the beast is. But before we look at some of those, Paul was also given a view of this power, and in 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 3 and 4, he said, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition." So people were thinking that Jesus' coming was soon. And as you know, in Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, he had to correct that because they were thinking, if we die before Jesus comes, we don't get to go with Jesus. And so he had to correct and straighten out about the second coming. He says it's not going to be right away. There's going to have to be an apostasy first. There's going to be a falling away from the truths as we teach them right now. In fact, it's going to get so bad, this apostasy, that there's going to be an individual, and he's called two different things here. He's called man of sin, and he's also called the son of perdition. Now, we wouldn't dare say that as individuals, but the Bible says that about this individual. Then it goes on and says some more. Who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God. So in this apostasy, this person's going to become so elevated in their own mind that they are going to rise above God. All that is called God or that is worship, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. I'd like to try to finish the sermon, and then you can bring up things if you want. Going on in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, it says, "For the mystery of iniquity doth already work." Paul said, under the influence of the Holy Spirit, I can already see this developing. Imagine that. Within Paul's lifetime, he could see that apostasy starting to develop. Only he who now letteth or hinders will let or hinder until he be taken out of the way. So he said it can't spring into power right now because there's another power hindering it. But when that power is out of the way, then it will accomplish what I've said. And then he gives a third name to this individual. And then shall that wicked, and in the King James, it just leaves it at that. But some translations put the one in there. And I think that makes it clear. And then shall that wicked one be revealed. So we have the son of perdition. We have that wicked one. And notice what will happen to this individual. Whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. Now this is another way of identifying. It says this beast power, this man of sin, this wicked one, is actually going to be motivated by Satan, but at the same time they're going to be claiming powers equal to God or above God. Now, here's why they get on the wrong track. They don't have a love of the truth. They receive not a love of the truth. And for this cause, God shall send them strong delusion. Now, from my study, I have come to the conclusion the strong delusion that it's talking about here is the impersonation of Jesus by Satan himself. And the beast power goes along with that. It says, yes, this is Jesus. And so why did they get so deceived? Because they didn't really love the truth in the beginning. They wouldn't receive a love of the truth. And so God allows them to get really convinced that they're right by this Satan appearing as Christ. And for this cause, God shall send them strong delusion that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So, yes, this is, opening up a door for the biggest blunder, the biggest mistake that will ever be made on earth by a world power, especially. World powers can't afford to make mistakes. They don't stay world power very long if they make a bunch of mistakes. Now, who is the beast? Well, Revelation 13, and we won't read the whole verses, but I'm just going to pull from chapter 13 the phrases that help to identify who it is. And anybody who really believes the Bible, at the end of these clues, can tell you who it is. Number one, because of the phrase, they were wounded to death. In other words, they suffered a serious loss of power. Now, as you look at the different world powers that are in the Bible, you discover one thing. When they pass off the scene, they never come back. But this power has two periods of world power. And after the first one, they were wounded to death. They had a serious loss of power. But in verse 3, it also says his deadly wound was healed, which means now a second period of world power. He gained back the lost power. Also, in verse 3 it says, all the world wondered after the beast. So it's very clear it's a world power. That narrows the field down. There's not very many world powers anymore. Russia used to be one, but they passed off the scene, and they still have some hope that they can influence things, but they're not really a world power. So there's not very many that we have to pick from. This one helps a lot. It, in verse 6, says that blasphemy against God would be committed by this power. So this then has to be a religious power. That narrows the field even more. A world power that's a religious power. And in verse 7, it says that this power would make war with the saints. In other words, they would persecute God's people. There would be a hatred, apparently, that would develop against God's people, and they would persecute. Now, it's interesting. There has been a period of persecution already in which it is estimated that 50 million to 100 million people were killed by this beast power. And here we have evidence of a second period of time that this power will be able to do the same thing. Now, it's interesting to notice that secular governments, if they don't like certain people, they usually just kill them. You know, they have different ways of killing lots of people. We saw that in Cambodia. We saw that in Germany under Hitler and so on. But this power would persecute. In other words, torture until people would really like to die. They would prefer death, actually, rather than having to go through this. But because of the purpose of the persecutor, death was prolonged as long as possible to give the maximum amount of persecution. Then number 6, it says, all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. So again, we have evidence that this would be a religious power and that there would actually be worship involved. Now, in Revelation 13:5, it says that a mouth was given speaking great things, which is a phrase that takes us back to the book of Daniel, where the same phrase is mentioned in Daniel 7:25. And he shall speak great words against the Most High. So here we have in Revelation speaking great things, and we have in Daniel speak great words, same thing. But in Daniel it tells us more. What are those great words that the beast power would speak? And shall wear out the saints of the Most High. That's the kind of persecution that would be conducted, wear them out. You know, not just eliminate them, not just take them out to the firing squad and kill them all, but would wear them out. But here's the very interesting thing, and think to change times and laws. Now, obviously, it's talking about God's law. And in God's law, there's really only one commandment that has to do with time. And that's the 4th commandment. So this text indicates that the beast power would not only persecute, but they would believe that they had the right to change the day of worship. Exodus 20, verses 8 to 10 says clearly, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. So clearly God is identifying the 7th day as the day for God's people to worship. And yet, the Bible predicts a power would rise who thought they had the right to change that. So, here's the power that freely admits that they believe they have the power to do it. This comes from the Catholic Mirror, an official organ of Cardinal Gibbons. Now, he passed away a long time ago. This was put in September 23, 1893. It says, the Catholic Church, by virtue of her divine mission, changed the day from Saturday to Sunday. And then later in this article, a question is asked, is Sunday the first day of the week? And did the church change the 7th day? Now this is important because some people say, well, we don't know which day is the 7th day. You know, well, here the beast power has no problem figuring out which day is Sunday. So if they don't have a problem figuring out which day is Sunday, we shouldn't have a problem figuring out which day is Sabbath. Is Sunday the first day of the week, and did the church change the seventh day Saturday for Sunday the first day? And here's what Cardinal Gibbons said. I answer, yes. So, clearly, the Catholic Church is claiming to be the beast, because the beast was the one that was to change the day of worship. And here's another one from, this was translated from Prompta Bibliotheca, which in English is Ready Library, Papa Article 2, and it was translated from Lucius Ferris. The Pope is of so great authority and power that he can modify, explain, or interpret even divine laws. The Pope can modify divine law, since his power is not of man, but of God, and he acts as vicegerent of God upon earth. So here it is claimed that the Pope has the power to change God's laws. Here's another one from the Catholic Extension magazine, and I give the address here, and it was published May 22, 1934. This is an answer to people's question. We accept the change of the Sabbath to Sunday. We frankly say, yes, the church made this change, made this law, as she made many other laws. And it gives a list of laws that she made. Did you know that they also claim to have made a law that the priest can't be married? Now, when you dig into what has gone on and even is going on in the Catholic Church right now, in regard to, having so many people who are forbidden to marry, it's not a pretty sight. And a few years ago, there was a big, flap about some other things up in Massachusetts and places. Here's another one, a little more modern. You noticed all those others are kind of old, a long time ago when they were put. But one day, this little paper called the Sentinel, which is published from the St. Catherine Catholic Church in Algonac, Michigan, and it was published on May 21, 1996. This came across my desk. And so I was reading in it, and I said, wow, perhaps the boldest thing, the most revolutionary change the church ever did happened in the first century. The holy day, the Sabbath, was changed from Saturday to Sunday. And so the position hasn't changed since 1896. Position hasn't changed since 1934. Even as late as 1996, we have a published official magazine of the Catholic Church claiming that we changed the day of worship. However, they also said some other things that I thought were quite interesting. Protestants who accept the Bible as the only rule of faith and religion should, by all means, go back to the observance of the Sabbath. Now, the Catholic Church is giving people good advice. It's saying, if you want to follow the Bible, if you want to keep the Sabbath of the Bible, you need to give up Sunday keeping, and you need to go back to the Bible Sabbath. These quotes, I just put Ibid down, but they're from the ones I already read, those articles. We also say that of all Protestants, the Seventh-day Adventists are the only group that reason correctly and are consistent with their teachings. I say, praise God for the Catholic Church. Look at their testimony. They say that if you really want to follow your Bible and you want to do what the Bible says, you need to become a Seventh-day Adventist. It is always somewhat laughable to see the Protestant churches in pulpit and legislature demand the observance of Sunday, of which there is nothing in the Bible. Now, you know, a lot of Protestants try to convince themselves and convince other people that the Bible has some evidence. And there's a couple of texts that get used. For instance, there was an offering that Paul was going to pick up when he went by, and he told them to do their accounting on Sunday, not on Sabbath. You don't do your accounting on Sabbath. But he told them that do your accounting on Sunday so that when I come by on Sabbath, he doesn't say Sabbath there, but when I come by, your offering's all ready and I can just pick it up and take it with me, or maybe even picked up the offering some other day of the week when he was going through. And that one, under close examination, doesn't hold water. The other one is a text where Paul was preaching because on Sunday morning he was going to leave the area. So on Sabbath evening, it looks like he started before sundown on Sabbath evening, and he kept on preaching most of the night. And during the night they had a communion service. And so people try to say, well, that's starting Sunday. However, that poses a problem because when most people think you're supposed to go to church, that's when Paul was not going to church, but he was traveling to his next place. And so under inspection, they don't really hold up. Some try to use that little phrase in Revelation where it says that I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, but it doesn't identify which day is the Lord's. However, it makes a lot more sense for the seventh-day Sabbath to be the Lord's day than for Sunday, especially since it wasn't God that changed the day. It was the beast power. People who think that the scriptures should be the sole authority should logically become Seventh-day Adventists. So twice, in two different articles, that counsel was given. Now, also, you'll notice in Revelation 14 that there was two powers. There was the beast, and then there was the image to the beast. So now we're going to give some clues about who could be the image of the beast. It starts back in Revelation 12, verses 15 and 16. And the serpent, now if you check out, you see the serpent represents Satan, going way back to the Garden of Eden, actually. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman. Now in Bible prophecy, the woman represents a church, pure woman, a pure church, an impure woman, an impure church. But in this case, it's a pure woman. It doesn't exactly say that, but because of what she did. So the serpent, working through some power, cast out of his mouth. Notice where it came from, out of the mouth. This would indicate false doctrines, trying to destroy the value of biblical teaching by false teaching. And so he sent that after the pure woman, trying to corrupt the pure woman. But something happened, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman. Now we're going to see in a little bit what that symbol earth is talking about, but I'm going to suggest to you that it's the power that develops the image to the beast that is being spoken about in the word earth here. And the earth helped the woman. And the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. Now, if you go back in history, you discover that due to the first period of power before the deadly wound, it was very difficult to live in Europe, anywhere in the old world, without having persecution and all kinds of problems. And it wasn't just the Catholic Church that was doing that, but some of the other religions were doing the same. So people started fleeing the old world to the United States. And so the earth helped the woman. Here was a place where you could practice whatever you believed without getting in trouble, without going to prison, without getting persecuted. I'm sure the old world would have liked to have come over here and made it the same here, but they weren't able to. So the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. In other words, it became very hard for these people to be molested in any way. Also, in Revelation 12:17, it says, and the dragon, that's also a symbol representing the devil, and the dragon was wroth with the woman, again, pure woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. Now, the remnant, of course, is the very last part of God's church, the last piece, you might say. And then, after making that introduction, it talks to us about two identifying marks. How do you know who that remnant church is? Which keep the commandments of God. Now, the Catholic Church teaches that you should keep 8 commandments. They've taken out the second commandment, which forbids the use of images, and you can understand why. They would take that one out. They split the 10th commandment in 2 pieces, so there's still 10. And then, of course, they put Sunday in instead of Sabbath. The Protestants keep 9 commandments. At least the conservative ones do. They believe, in fact, I heard a preacher on the radio actually saying that we need to keep all 9 commandments. I thought, wow, he's pretty bold to say that. Somebody's going to say, what about the 10th? Then there's a second identifying mark, and have the testimony of Jesus. Now later in Revelation, it identifies what that is. I guess I didn't put it there. And it's the spirit of prophecy. Or, in other words, every prophet of the Bible received the testimony of Jesus to pass on to us. And all the books of the Bible have been put down as a result of individuals being given the testimony of Jesus. However, this text is talking about the very last remnant. And the Bible had been closed for 2,000 years, approximately. So it can't be talking about the Bible here. It has to be talking about a modern prophet. That when you find a church that has a modern prophet, long after the close of the biblical canon, they were given the same testimony of Jesus that the others were given. When you find a church that keeps all 10 commandments and has a true prophet, now you can find several churches that have false prophets, but when you find one that has a true prophet, you know you found the remnant church. Now here's some more clues about the image to the beast. says power was given unto him to continue 42 months. Here's the first period of power by the beast power, which we now know as the Catholic Church. They themselves identify themselves as the power that can change the day of worship. Now notice that date. Their power, the deadly wound, was given to them in 1798. And what power that would become a world power was rising into prominence at that time? There's only one choice. Only one. The United States of America. In Revelation 13:11, we have a clue, because as it talks about this power, it says coming up out of the earth. Well, Revelation 17:15 identifies what does it mean when a power comes up out of the earth. The waters which thou sawest where the whore sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So, as you read about these powers in both Daniel and Revelation, we see that a power would usually arise out of a heavily populated area where there were lots of people, multitudes of people, many nations. And that's why in Europe, you find that's where most of them came up. But all of a sudden, the Bible introduces a power that comes up in the earth, from the earth, or you could say a sparsely populated area. Guess what? That's where the United States began from. A sparsely populated area. There were Indians living here. There were different tribes in different parts of the country, but it was not a heavily populated area. While, we read stories of massacres and so on, there was no way the Indians could stand against the white man. And so the white man just slowly took over everything. Kind of easy, actually. Took it over. Now, another interesting identifying mark is that this power would have two horns. Most powers are represented by one horn, but this one had two horns. And its characteristic when it rose was a lamb. But you remember we read later it would speak like a dragon. Well, what is represented by two horns? In the old world, both the religion and the political was in the hands of the king or whoever was in power. They had both areas. But in this country, after a short period of mistake, this country became a country that separated church and state. Two sources of power. And they made it where the state has no authority over religion. That people can practice religion as they so choose, and the government can say nothing to them about how they're going to practice their religion. Unless they, break one of the last 6 commandments, then the government would have a right. Also, it would be a government elected by the people, which we call republicanism. We have 2 main parties now, but it is a government elected by the people. However, as time would go by, due to the involvement, no doubt, with the beast, it would speak as a dragon, which really means it would join the papacy in commanding Sunday worship. And that separation between church and state would be eliminated, and the government would, in joining with the beast, they would make an image to the beast, they would say the same thing as the beast, and that's what our text was warning about. Now, here's where we come to the point that this is the greatest blunder that has ever been made. Because here's what's going to happen to the beast and the image to the beast. The same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. And if you study Revelation 16, that is the 7 last plagues. So these two powers are going to suffer the 7 last plagues, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And that's bad enough to suffer the 7 last plagues. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Now that's basically what we call hellfire. So they're going to suffer the 7 last plagues, and they're going to suffer hellfire, which doesn't burn throughout eternity. No matter how bad somebody has been, God does not burn them eternally. But, and that's very clear in this text, there's many really, but Malachi 4:1 says, "For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble." Now, stubble can't burn very long. It's just short. And the fire moves rapidly through the stubble. It shall be stubble, and the day that cometh shall burn them up. So they're not going to keep burning. They're going to be burned up. Saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch. The root is the devil, and everyone that connects with the devil and does his dirty work is involved. They'll all be destroyed in this hellfire. Now, what is it that would cause such a huge blunder to be made? We Catholics do not accept the Bible as the only rule of faith. So they freely admit, we don't take all of what we believe out of the Bible. Besides the Bible, we have the living church, the authority of the church as a rule to guide us. Now, I don't know whether every pope has believed that or every priest has believed that. Probably not all believe that. But this is the official position of the church, and this is what is going to lead to causing people to suffer the 7 last plagues and to burn in hellfire. Don't you agree that's a pretty big blunder? Now, in closing, one more text that came to mind as I thought about this huge blunder, to think, well, we can change the day of worship, and we can even persecute people who don't want to worship on Sunday because we're so sure of ourselves that we have the authority from God to do this. It's like this text, Matthew 16:26. "For what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul?" Oh, how sad it's going to be in that day. Yes, they will gain the whole world. These two powers will link up together. They will gain the whole world, except for a very small remnant that can't be eliminated. They will gain the whole world, but in the end, they lose their own soul. Don't you agree? That's the biggest blunder that's ever been made by a world power. May the Lord help us to not listen to that kind of reasoning that would lead us down that path. God will have a group that will not go down that path. May it be us.